Good morning. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. We're in the book of Exodus. We're now in Exodus chapter 34. I'm just going to review. Maybe someone's tuning in, they've never heard this before. Um, the children of Israel. Well, plus, this is a slightly new way of looking at what was happening in Exodus. In The children of Israel were in Egypt, their fault. There was a famine, and that was the occasion for them to go there. But the famine lasted 7 years. They went there the last 5 years of the famine. Then it was over. Could have gone back home, decided to stay. Even though God had said, "This is the land I'm giving you in Israel," they decided to stay because they knew a big shot. Good morning, Susie. They knew a big shot in Egypt. Joseph was like the vice president of Egypt. So they decided to stay. Then, of course, the scripture says a new Pharaoh arose who didn't know Joseph. Joseph had passed. He didn't have the same connection, this new Pharaoh, to the children of Israel and saw them as invaders and enemies. And good morning, Donna. And put them in bondage. Um, Slaves, right? So, in actuality, the Bible says that they complained because of the bondage. They wanted the bondage lightened. They wanted it back like the old days when they could just do what they want when Joseph was in charge. It didn't say, "Please deliver us and send us back to Israel," because in Israel, which at that time was called Canaan, they only had two plots of land. They had some land up in Shechem, up in northern Israel, and they had some land in southern Israel. So that's kind of like you own part of San Francisco and you own part of LA, which is fantastic, but the rest of the state of California you don't own. And so God's wanting to send them back there. They don't necessarily want to go back there, but they do want the bondage to be over. So what happens is he sets them free and brings them out. But at the first sign, they wanted to go back, thinking, well, I get, things will be different now. Haha, Pharaoh's been defeated. Let's go back to Egypt. That's what we've been there for a couple hundred years. We're comfortable there. God's original covenant, he was saying to them, "I'm going to send you back to this new land and you're going to worship me and I'm going to protect you." And they were saying to him, "Yea, you rescued us. Now let us go back." They didn't vocalize that part, but they didn't have a meeting of minds. I call this lesson a new covenant. This is a new covenant. God saying, "I have to reestablish the covenant because you were not understanding. You had a different idea in mind." That could happen. You can get a new job and you think your job is to make pizzas, but the boss hired you to build pizza ovens. And you go, "Why am I carrying all these bricks? And when am I going to start building pizzas?" And you just had two different ideas of "help me make pizzas." You had two different ideas of what "help me make pizzas" meant. Um, and so God is going to correct what they were thinking. And uh, in this new covenant, okay, so uh, which happened, this is hilarious. Oh, there it is. Okay, which happened after they broke the first covenant, right? After they made an idol and said, "Here are the gods that are going to take us back to Egypt." They said, "This is the God that led us out of Egypt, and this is the God that's going to take us back." Moses smashed that idol, and there was consequences. So Moses is now up on the mountain talking to God again, and God's going to reestablish his covenant, make a new covenant. So in Exodus chapter 34, I'm just reviewing a little bit. We're going to start with verse 8, but I'm going to go back to verse 1 just to remind us what's happening here. So in verse 1, it says, And the Lord said to Moses, um, Cut two tablets of stone like the first ones, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. And I love him adding that which you broke, because he didn't have to say that. He said, just make two tablets, but because you broke them, really emphasizing you broke them. I didn't tell you to. That's your anger. That's your issue, which we talked about last week. Moses' anger issue. I used for an example in Exodus chapter 32, verse 11, once God had told Moses what was going on. Once God says, you need to go down there, they have made an idol, and I'm going to wipe them out. Verse 11 of Exodus 32, Moses says, Then Moses pleaded with the Lord his God and said, Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Like, why are you so sad? I don't get it. However, just 8 verses later, once he got down on the mountain in Exodus 32, verse 19, it says, So it was as soon as he came near the camp, Moses, that he saw the calf and the dancing and went, and now he's personally upset. God had already told them about the calf. He'd already told them all of that. But Moses took a personal affront to it because he asked God, Why are you so upset? And God said, Okay, I won't. I'm not upset. It says, so Moses' anger became hot, and he cast the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. So this is Moses taking things personal as though it's a front against him personally that they were dancing. So he broke the tablets. So God says, okay, I need to make a new tablets first of all. Verse 2 of Exodus 34 says, So be ready in the morning, because we're going to do these new tablets. Come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself to me there on the top of the mountain. Just know that Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb are the same mountain. Just depends on which culture, which time period is talking about it. Okay. Present yourself to me there on top of the mountain, and no man shall come up with you. Let no man be seen throughout all the mountain. Let neither flocks nor herds feed before that mountain, because my presence is visibly coming down the mountain. And that's like turning up the heat on an oven. Don't, the waiter puts the plate on the table. Don't touch that. That's hot. It just came out of the hot oven. It's 375 degrees. So they can't come near the mountain because I'm coming down. And these people are not sanctified, and they'll burn up. So Moses cut, verse 4 of Exodus 34, he cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. Then Moses rose early in the morning, went up Mount Sinai, Horeb, Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him, and he took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. Verse 5, Now the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. Why is he doing that? Well, in the previous chapter, Exodus 33, verse 18, Moses said, Please show me your glory. Now, Moses had seen many manifestations of God's glory. So he's saying, show me your essence. Show me who you are. I want to really know you. This person that we are making this covenant with. They had zero relationship with God. Moses had never spoken to God until he was 80 years old and God set the burning bush on fire. They didn't, who are you? This person who suddenly delivered us. Who are you? I need to know more about you. It's like taking a client out to lunch or somebody. Let me get to know you better before I accept this job as being your spokesperson. I need to know who am I speaking for. So God identifies himself in Jeremiah as this triangle that I was talking about. In Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 24, it says, Let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I'm the Lord exercising loving kindness. That's mercy. So I'm mercy, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. These are 3 facets of God. For in these I delight. I delight in judgment. Can't help but do it. Delight in exercising righteousness and helping people have right standing so that they won't come under judgment. So they won't even need the mercy. Right? We only need the mercy because we mess up. But I delight in mercy when you mess up. And when you refuse to repent, I delight in judgment because it's so good for you to get the consequences because that's going to change your behavior. The things that I'm asking you not to do, God says to us, are things that are hurting you. They're things that hurt you, things where you're messing yourself up. And so I delight in giving you consequences because that teaches you not to hurt yourself. But I also delight in giving mercy and having no consequences. But also mostly, not mostly, I also delight in righteousness and helping you not need either one because you're cool. Okay. So in these things I delight. So he says, show me your glory. In Exodus chapter 33, verse 19, God says, okay, I'm going to make my goodness, my mercy, pass before you. Because you've seen my judgment. I just judged all those people. And I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I'm going to identify my personality traits. I'm going to explain who I am. And I will be gracious. So he's identifying himself. I'll be gracious to whom I will be gracious. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So my mercy, I just give it out. There's no earning of it. There's no, well, if I'm really good, he'll be mercy. No, if you're really good, you're righteous. When we mess up, the mercy comes, and it's just God's discretion. I'll be gracious. You may not think that person deserves mercy, that person you're mad at who just did you wrong, but I may give them mercy. I'll be gracious to whom I have be gracious. I'll have compassion, and whom I'll have compassion. That's my choice. Mercy is just my choice. I just give out. We just sometimes, oh, God was merciful. I should have been in an accident just then because I wasn't paying attention. But God was merciful and saved me from being in that accident, right? Or somebody almost hit you. Ooh, that was God's mercy. If I had gone through that, and I've had this experience, like someone cut me off, so I had to wait for them, and then this person who was crazy went through this intersection and got hit. And I thought, oh, I'm actually glad that person cut me off, and I decided not to race them. Oh, you cut me off, I'll show you. Okay, fine, you go ahead. And boom, I thought, oh, that's the mercy of God. That put that thought in my head to let that person just go ahead. That was God's mercy. He didn't have to do that. So in Exodus chapter 34, verse 6, he says, so the Lord passed before him. Here's the side of you I want to show, Moses, because you've seen other sides of me. I want to emphasize to you my mercy. And I call this section a new covenant. And here's more stipulation in the previous chapter. So, because God's now passing before him in chapter 34, he warns about that in chapter 33. He says, you cannot see my face, Exodus 33:20. You cannot see my face, for no man shall see my face and live. And the Lord said, because it's just too much, it'd be too much. Now, once we get our new bodies, once we pass, any relative you have in the Lord that passed, you can see the face of God now. There's no problem with that. And the Lord, but no living person would be able to see it, and it would be too much. And the Lord said, so here is a place by me, and you shall stand on the rock. So you're on this mountain, stand on this rock, and so it shall be when my glory passes by that I'll put you in the cleft of the rock, in a cave of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand while I pass by. But I'm showing my mercy, but even my mercy side is just too much. And interestingly enough, and this is an experience just for Moses because of what Moses had to do. We'll see certain people have certain experiences in the Bible. Oh, I want that experience. You only want that experience if you're called to do what they are called to do. So Moses singularly had this experience because of what he was called to do, to pastor. He was going to pastor them for 40 years in the wilderness and demonstrate to them and introduce them to this God that they had known nothing about. Nothing about. Not since Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. 200 years earlier had anybody actually spoken to this God, had a relationship with this God. They've been in Egypt for 200 years learning Egyptian gods. That's why they were so quick to build an idol to an Egyptian god and go back, because that's all they knew. So Moses is going to spend 40 years introducing them to this God. He doesn't know that at this point. But let me reintroduce myself and emphasize my mercy. When's Elijah? Like 500 years later, in 1 Kings chapter 19, Elijah comes to the same mountain and wants to have that same experience. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 8 said, so he arose, this is Elijah, and ate and drank. This is after he's threatened by Jezebel, after he's just called down fire from the sky. And then Jezebel said, did you just get my prophets? I'm gonna have to hurt you. So he ran because Elijah had no power. He was just doing that at the behest of God, calling down fire from the sky. So he ran and he's exhausted and he sleeps the night. And then it says, so he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, which is Sinai, right? Horeb, Sinai, same thing, the mountain of God, because he wanted to go and have that same Moses experience. And there he went into a cave. So he goes into that same cave. God told Moses, I'm going to put you in a cave. He goes to that cave and he spends the night in that place, waiting to have that same experience. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And that's because, why did you come all the way back to this mountain? And because you think you need to have a Moses experience in order to do what I've told you to do? You're not called to the same thing Moses was called to do. So you don't need to see fire and like. And as we know, when this happened with Elijah, it said the wind came by and the tornado and the fire and all this happened, the earthquake, but God was in none of it because that just a still small voice. And that's the thing that God was in. He says, this is how I'm going to lead you, Elijah. You don't need these miracles. Moses needed them because these people did not know God at all for a couple hundred years. So God has to introduce himself and explain himself. And they have to know, yes, you have to listen to me. There really are consequences. I'm not the substitute teacher that says, class, please be quiet. And the kids know, you're not my real teacher. I don't have to listen to you. Yes, I am your real teacher. There's no other teacher. I'm God and you do have to listen to me. So he had to give great consequences so that the people would know, oh, I can't just build another God and go back to Egypt. There really is just one God. There aren't other gods. He's still trying to teach this to them. He's trying to change their way of thinking because they've had a couple hundred years. Their choice they chose to stay in Egypt, even though God had given them the land. They'd have a couple of years of worshiping all these other gods. So Moses needed God to do incredible things. Elijah doesn't need that. You just need a still small voice. You guys have now known me 500 years. You've been back in Israel 500 years. So you don't need the same experience. Don't try to have a Moses experience. You don't need it. What are you doing here, Elijah? Okay. So God puts Moses on the cleft of the rock. Excuse me. And proclaimed, because he said, I'm going to tell you, proclaim my name. The Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth. So let me first, excuse me, let me first introduce myself on this side of the triangle. Because I had to introduce myself the other way. I had to introduce my judgment side first, which he did in Exodus chapter 20. The first time he brought them to the mountain and the Spirit of God came down on the mountain in Exodus chapter 20. It says, you shall not bow down. Thank you. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. He's talking about other gods. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So again, of those who hate me. So father hates me, the son hates me, the grandson hates me, the great grandson. And so I visit judgment on them so that they can see the consequences of hating me. And hopefully by the time it gets to the great great grandchild, he'll go, oh, I don't want that. I see the consequences. And so I'm going to do something different. So that's the goal. There we go. So he had to introduce himself that way first. Then he says, but showing mercy to thousands of generations to those who love me and keep my commandments. The of generations is understood. So, so you shall not bow down to them because I will visit judgment, but I also will show mercy. So he introduces himself in the opposite way this time. Let me reintroduce myself to you, Moses. Keeping mercy for thousands. So he says, I am the Lord, gracious, long-suffering, abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands. Let me talk about the thousands first. Thousand generations, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and by no means clearing the guilty doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. So let me first say I'm gracious, long-suffering, keeping mercy for thousand generations, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. But by no means is clearing the guilty like, oh, so that means we can do whatever we want. We can just dance naked in front of this idol. Well, no. I have this judgment side. That's also part of who I am. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So he says it in the opposite order of when he first came down the mountain. When I was getting my master's in education, and here's how you teach, they advise that you first go in, your first day you go into the classroom, you establish order first. First, establish order. Because the kids need to know you're somebody who does have rules, and the class is going to run a certain way, and there'll be consequences if they don't obey the rules. Then once they understand that, then you can show a nicer side, a funner side, but the first, make sure they know who you are, and then it's okay. I mean, the consequences of not listening, because the most important thing is you got to listen. I happen to know the information that you want, so we can have fun after you listen. Then we'll have fun with it. But we can't have fun all day and be crazy, and then you never learned anything. So God introduced himself on the mountain. Let me give you the consequences first, and then tell you, but I am gracious. Now that they understand that, now that unfortunately they've seen consequences, which is why I brought up the consequences in the first place, because look how crazy they are. Now let me reintroduce myself, now that they've seen some consequences. When I got my master's, they suggested, do something the first day. And so somebody whispered, and I said, that's it, you whispered. I won't have any whispering. And they went, ooh, wow, he even gets you for whispering. Do something like that the first day. So then they know what the limits are. Okay, these are the boundaries. When he says be quiet, you have to be quiet. When he says don't whisper, you can't whisper. Then have fun. Okay, so now that I've done that thing and you've seen people be punished, let me reintroduce myself. Mercy first. Keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children children's children to the third and fourth generations. Now, again, I just want to reemphasize that some people have taken the scripture, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation, as believing that consequences that are happening to you now are based upon things that people did 3 and 4 generations ago. But he's saying their behaviors are going to be imitated. They're going to have those same behaviors. In some cases, your children may imitate you, and then their children may imitate those bad behaviors. And so it takes sometimes 3 or 4 generations of consequences for people to change. But that's not necessarily true. Maybe in the next generation they change. So if in the next generation people change, then they don't get consequences visited on them. So in Ezekiel chapter 18, I'm just quickly go through this. Verse 1 says, the word of the Lord came to me again saying, what do you mean when you use this proverb concerning the land of Israel? So this is a proverb they made up. What do you mean when you say, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? You're saying that the fathers did something and now the children, there's suffering consequences for it. He says, as I live, says the Lord God, you shall no longer use this proverb. Don't say that what happens to the children is based on what the fathers did. And he goes on to say, if the children sin, then yeah, they get consequences. But if they don't, then they don't get consequences. And Ezekiel chapter 18, same thing, verse 19. Yet you say, well, why should the son not bear the guilt of the father? I don't understand. If the father did something wrong, we've been saying this for so long, why should we change it? He said, because the son has done what is lawful and right and kept all my statutes. The father sinned, but the son didn't. It says, what if the Son has done what is lawful and right and has kept all my statutes and observed them? He shall surely live. He'll live. He won't die. And he uses extremes, live and die, for consequence, no consequence, right? He says, the soul who sins shall die. The person that sins, those and by sins he means rejects me, turns totally away. He uses the extreme of sin. He's not being subtle about little time. You reject me, you turn. The soul that sins dies. The wages of sin is death. So, not this. I make it personal. The Son shall not bear the guilt of the Father, nor the Father bear the guilt of the Son. It doesn't go the opposite way. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. So this is not something that you get passed down to you. Oh, I've been good my whole life, but my grandfather sinned, so that's why my life's a mess. He wants us to know, if your life's a mess, he wants you to look around and go, I wonder if I did something. He doesn't want you to say, no, everything I do is perfect. It must have been my great grandfather. So, nope. Your righteousness is upon you, your wickedness is upon you. So he's just simply introducing himself again and saying, I give mercy for 1,000 generations and visit the iniquity upon those who sin. Sometimes it takes 3 and 4 generations before they learn a lesson. So he's introducing himself in the opposite way. He had to show up as the scary teacher first to get their attention. And now I can be merciful, because if I'm merciful first, they'll take advantage of me. So even though he showed up as the scary teacher, they still took advantage and went crazy. But they couldn't go, what? What happened? Because he says, the first thing, words out of my mouth was, don't make any idols. I will burn you up. Those are the first words I said. Those are the first things in the 10 Commandments, is all about no idols. And that's the first thing you did because you're crazy. Exodus chapter 34, verse 8. So, going on from there. So, Moses made haste, and he bowed his head toward the earth and he worshiped, because God's passing by. He's reintroducing himself in this new way. I want to introduce my mercy first, and then the judgment. So then he says, if now I've found grace in your sight, O Lord, let my Lord, I pray, go among us. Make sure you go with us. Because remember you said you weren't going to go with us? And of course, the Lord has already said, yeah, I'm telling you, I will go with you. So you need to calm down. But he's just re-emphasizing, just making sure. I pray, go among us. Go in the midst of us. Even though we are stiff-necked people, pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. So he says, behold, I make a covenant. So let me reintroduce myself and make a new covenant where we're both on the same page. Because again, sometimes you take a job, you're on a different page than your boss. Your boss said one thing and you heard a different thing, and you're shocked. Oh, you're shocked. Okay. So I'm going to make a new covenant and explain it again, who I am, so you can hear this time. Before all your people, I will do marvels such as have not been done in all the earth. So I'm going to make a new covenant. I'm going to do marvels for you, nor in any nation. No one's ever seen things like this. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of the Lord. So that's how I'm going to protect you. I'm sending you to this new land. So, because again, they didn't necessarily want to go back to Canaan. They just wanted the Egyptians to stop treating them like slaves. But God's saying, no, part of this covenant is I'm sending you back to Canaan. So get that in your head. Stop trying to go back to Egypt. So let me reintroduce myself and what I'm going to do. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to do marvels. It says, for it's an awesome thing that I will do with you. Examples of this, when they first got over, finally crossed the Jordan and got into the Canaan, Joshua chapter 3, verse 16. It says, the waters which came down from upstream stood still. So they're crossing the Jordan. When they first stepped over into the new land and then the Jordan River's in front of them, they had to cross the Jordan. The waters just stopped. And then it says they rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the Sea of Arabah, the Salt Sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. It's like, wow. No one's seen anything like that. Joshua chapter 6. This has happened right away, because this is what he said he'd do. If you go ahead and cross into the new land, let me entice you to go into the new land. I'll do all kinds of incredible miracles. So the people shouted, Joshua 6:20, when the priest blew the trumpets. Now, this is when they're marching around Jericho 7 times. Seventh times on the seventh day. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. No one's ever seen the walls of the city fall down flat like that. I said I'll do miracles against the people who are coming at you. Joshua chapter 10. And it happened as they fled before Israel. So there's a nation that was attacking Israel. Well, Israel surprised them and came up from the back and came up on the top of the mountain. The people started running down the mountain, and Israel's chasing them down the mountain. And they're going, oh, they scared us. We didn't know they were coming up the mountain the other way. So as they fled before Israel and were on the descent of Beth Horon, that's the name of the mountain, that the Lord cast down large hailstones from heaven on them as far as Azekah. Like they're running and huge hailstones are coming down and they die. I mean, like the ice shoots thick that will kill you because they're attacking God's people on purpose. They don't believe in this God. They've heard about the miracles. They saw the sea dry up. They knew about the Red Sea drying up. They knew about the walls of Jericho falling down. No, we're going to attack that God. And I'm like, okay, I need to show you what will happen if you attack me. And it says, there were more who died from the hailstones than the children of Israel killed with the sword. So he says, so let me reintroduce myself. If you go on into this land, I'm going to protect you. Let me say it in a different order. Now that you've seen the judgment, I don't have to emphasize that. Let me emphasize the mercy, what I'm going to do for you. Verse 11, observe what I command you this day. So let me just restate. I'm going to rewrite the Ten Commandments. I'm going to restate all this stuff. Observe it. Behold, I am driving out from before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. These are the big six. All right. So this is the first thing that he said to them. This is the first message that he sent to them after 200 years of silence. Again, silent because none of them were calling on him. They were all calling on Egyptians' gods. They would tell stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but they were in Egypt. They chose to be in Egypt. They liked Egypt. Egypt was the biggest city in the world and had all these incredible gods, and they were into it. So here's the first message he sent to them through Moses. Exodus chapter 3, verse 7, he said, and the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. I've heard their cry because they want to go back to Canaan, because none of them were born in Canaan. They were all born in Egypt. So they were crying because of the taskmasters. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Some of us want to stay in Egypt. We just want God to fix Egypt. But he needs to take us out of Egypt. You got to come out of that situation. Come on all the way out. Nah, I'm liking me some Egypt. Okay. But I prepared a place for you. And you know what? I'm gonna just make you want to go there. I'm gonna make you hate where you are, because where you are is killing you. So I have come to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So that's the first thing he told them. I'm taking you to their place. But now he's saying, I'm going to drive them out. Don't worry. Don't worry. So please go to this land. Again, and I'm saying, that's how God says, I set before you blessing and cursing. I set before you life and death. Choose life. I can't make you. I created choice. I invented choice. So, but look how great life looks. Why would you choose death? So take heed to yourself. Exodus chapter 34, verse 12. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you're going, lest it be a snare in your midst, because you're going to this land. So don't make a covenant to them, please. It's gonna be a snare to you. So what happens? Even in the land where they currently were, before they crossed over, they started making covenants with other people. In Numbers chapter 25, verse 1, it says, now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and that's a place near Mount Sinai. And the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. And they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. Moab said, hey, we're going to have a barbecue for this god Molech. You're going to love him. In fact, they heat up the charcoals right under Moloch, and the kids play in the fire. It's really cool. And come on out. And it's cool. It says they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. This is fantastic. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Because I told you not to do this. What is wrong with you? Why are you so anxious to have other gods? What is it? Stupid. Exactly. So, well, it's more immediate. I got to tell you. Anyway, so Exodus chapter 34, verse 13 says, "But you shall destroy their altars." So we're making a new covenant. Let me start off and be really even more deliberate, more specific about having no other gods before me. You shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, cut down their wooden images. So do not, because don't do it. Hello. I simply say, before I said, you used to have no other God before me. I'm a jealous God. Don't worship. Now I'm being real specific. Did they do it? Nah, they didn't listen. Judges chapter 2, after they'd been there for maybe 100 years on the other side in Jordan, it says, "Then the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I led you up from Egypt." This is Judges 2, verse 1. "I led you up from Egypt and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And here's what I said in the covenant. And you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. And you shall tear down their altars. But you've not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this?" I was asking the same question. Why would they do that? "Therefore, I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall be thorns in your side, and their God shall be a snare to you. I also told you what would happen. If you obey me, I'll drive them out. If you don't obey me, I won't drive them out, and they're going to be a thorn in your side, and their God shall be a snare to you." So it was when the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the children of Israel that the people lifted up their voices and wept. "Oh, you're right." They cried. "I can't believe it." Oh. And then 100 years later, they're back doing it. 1 Kings chapter 16. "And it came to pass, as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, right? And this is Ahab, who, like, as though it had been a trivial thing. His father, Jeroboam, was sinful. He said, no big deal. And so why is God so judgy and so, because when he doesn't bring his wrath down, people just think, here's the next generation, commit the same sins. Okay, so, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Then he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. So I know there's a tabernacle to the Lord here, but I'm going to build a temple to Baal too, because Baal's a good God. So he gets judged, right? Ahab gets killed, Jezebel gets killed. People weep and mourn. And 100 years later, now King Ahaz. So that was King Ahab earlier. 2 Kings chapter 16, verse 10. "Now King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tilgath-Pileser, the king of Assyria." The Assyrians, they're not God's chosen people. At this time, they're worshiping idols. King Ahaz went down to Syria to meet him, and he saw an altar that was at Damascus. Excuse me. I said, "Ooh, that's cool, an altar to another god." And King Ahaz sent Urijah, the priest, the design of that altar and its pattern according to all its workmanship. Like, they had such a cool altar, had horns all over it, and all like, wow, we should have an altar just like this. Should you? God already told them how to build the altar. Then Urijah the priest built an altar according to all that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus. So Urijah the priest made it before King Ahaz came back from Damascus. So when he went up to Damascus, saw, like, ooh, look how they're worshiping these idols. They're really going all out. And when the king came back from Damascus, the king saw the new altar, and the king approached the altar and made offerings on it and said, yes. Okay. So they just like worshiping they just liked it. Even so God's not introducing these things for the fun of it. He knows what they're going to do, and he's warning them. If you do that, I'm going to burn you up. So I'm warning you. But there's going to be a remnant who actually will believe me and listen. So I'm good. The rest of you can, because I just need a line to exist. Because eventually, from your line, the Messiah is going to come, and then I'm going to use that to preach to the rest of the world. And I'm going to say the same thing to them. Hey, world, if you listen to me and obey my voice, blessings. If you don't, cursings. Although, because I'm merciful, I may take a long time before the cursings show up. So you may think, I'm doing my own thing and I can't get caught. But eventually, the mighty will fall. So just because I don't judge you instantly, because I delight in mercy, I'm going to lead with mercy, doesn't mean what you're doing is correct. So when you get judged, hopefully you'll go, oh, this was because of my behavior. I need to change my behavior. Verse 14, almost done with Exodus chapter 33, today's lessons. It says, for you shall worship no other God. For the Lord, whose name is jealous, by the way, that's my name, is a jealous God. I just want to be clear. Not because there are other, I'm jealous for your affection. I'm jealous that you're worshiping something that's made up. You've made that up. There are no other gods. So sometimes it can be understandable. Excuse me, you've got a new Mustang, a 2022 Mustang. Somebody drives up in a 2025 Corvette. You go, oh man, like that's so cool. That's even better than mine. I don't know if Corvette's better than Mustangs. I'm just making it up. Right? And that's understandable. Oh, I have seats in the 10th row, but you had seats in the 5th row. But God's saying, there is no other God. Yet you're worshiping that doesn't exist. So I'm jealous for your affection. I'm not jealous of the other's God. I'm not thinking, oh man, that God's so cool. There is no other God. So when he's jealous, I'm jealous for your affection. I want you to be spending that on me because I'm the one that created you. I don't even understand why you're worshiping something that you made. You made that, and yet you're worshiping it. I made you, and I can't get your attention. What's up with that? So don't worship another God. Verse 15, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of that land, and they play the harlot with their gods, and make sacrifices to their gods, and one of them invites you, and you eat of his sacrifice. And they sang this way before they did it. I'm telling you exactly what you're going to do because I actually turned my head and I see you doing it. So let me warn you so that maybe you won't do it. But he knows they're going to do it. But so that when you get punished for it, you're not shocked. Verse 16, and you take of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their gods, and make your sons play the harlot with their gods. So, in Numbers chapter 25, actually they've been wandering around the wilderness for a while. Verse 6 says, and indeed, one of the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. They're crying for forgiveness. And hey, look who I found, this Midianite woman. Verse 7, now when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand. Now, he's offering them a prostitute. What he's seeing is not just, oh, look, there's a woman there, but they are having temple sex right there in front of the tabernacle. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her body, because she's a priestess of the Midianites. She's worshiping gods, and you're going to bring her to the temple and have sex in the temple, in the tabernacle. So the plague was stopped among the children of Israel. So I'm warning you of these things. So let me reintroduce myself and give more emphasis. Some of you, like Phinehas, are going to listen and go, nope, not having this, nope. And some of you are going to think I'm making this up. He's not going to, what's he really going to do? Well, let me show you. So this is God's reintroduction. This is the new version of the covenant. I'm going to put things in a different order. I had to put them in a certain order when I first showed up, but I want to emphasize my mercy first. So you know, that's really what I delight in, is being merciful to 1,000 generations. But there are 3 or 4 generations I will have to show my consequences to, but that's not what I delight in, but I tell you, I'll do it. I have no problem with it, you know. But I want to demonstrate my mercy. So now that you've seen the consequences, I'm just going to reintroduce myself in a different way so you understand I want to be merciful, but I want you to understand that if you do crazy stuff, there'll be consequences because both these are parts of my personality. Okay, so I'm stopping here on chapter Exodus chapter 34, verse 16. This at 11:15 today, I will be preaching. Hey Denise, um, on First Samuel chapter 22nd at my church. So I'm saying 11:15. Service starts at 11, but it's usually around 11:15 or so that the preacher gets up. Today, this is me. For others of you who only listen on Sundays, which is lovely, I'll see you again next week as we continue in Exodus chapter 34. And for those of you who also watch on Wednesdays, we're in the New Testament. We're in the book of John. We're in the 21st chapter of John. Jesus has been resurrected and he's finally lured them. Well, he's about to lure them to the mountain where he told them he'd meet them all along. But first, he's got to have a fish fry on the beach and try to get inside Peter's head so that Peter can start acting differently. Um, okay, so thank you again so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in an hour or in 3 days on Wednesday or next Sunday. All right, thanks. Bye bye.